Hi, my name is Emma. And if you had asked me just a year ago what home meant to me, I would have told you it was everything. My anchor. My reward after decades of struggle. My quiet piece of the world at the edge of Redwood Hills. Oregon. It was a chilly Thursday afternoon when I pulled into the cracked driveway of my old Cedar house on Cedar Lane. I'd just finished mopping soda off the hallway floors at the high school, thanks to a few freshmen who thought it'd be hilarious to dump an entire liter of Mountain Dew during lunch hour. At 67. Pranks don't feel funny. They feel like backaches and sore knees. My keys jingled loudly in my hand. Louder than usual. And not just because I was tired. Something felt off. The porch light was on. I always left it off during the day. And parked right in front of my garage was a sleek silver SUV I didn't recognize. I climbed the porch steps I'd stained myself 20 years ago. The door creaked. And the moment I stepped in, a wave of artificial lavender perfume hit me thick. Cloying. Like something out of a department store. And then came the laughter unfamiliar. Rehearsed. Confident. It echoed from the living room. I took off my shoes by the hallway rug. The same rug I bought after my divorce. Back when I still believed small details could hold your life together. And then I heard her voice. Melissa. My daughter-in-law. And then? Another voice, male. Older. Confidently tapping on the walls as he spoke. I turned the corner and froze. There. Sitting on my couch. Were two strangers. A man and a woman. Both in their late 60s. Melissa stood beside them, pointing around the room like a real estate agent mid-tour. We could knock this wall out and open up the kitchen. She was saying. It would feel so much more modern. This carpet, we'll rip it up. We want light oak flooring throughout. The man nodded, already pulling out a tape measure. The woman smiled dreamily. Travis, she said. Can you believe this space? It's even better in person. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to comprehend what I was looking at. These people, these strangers were making plans in my home. Like it was already theirs. Like I'd vanished. Or never mattered. Excuse me, I said softly. They all turned. Melissa blinked, taken aback, but only for a second. Oh, Emma, she said, recovering quickly. You're home early. She gestured toward the couple. These are my parents, Travis and Carol Whitmore. The man stood to shake my hand. His palm was cool and dry. Emma. Such a pleasure. Melissa's told us so much about you. We're thrilled to finally see our future home. Future home. Those two words cracked something inside me. But I didn't speak. Not yet. I just looked around the living room at the walls I had painted. The sofa I had paid off in installments. The room where I once danced with my son as a toddler. And I realized something was being taken from me. And no one had even asked. It was the smell of motor oil that led me there. The garage had always been Derek's domain ever since he was a teenager. And that day? It was the only place in the house that still felt like mine. I opened the side door quietly. Derek's legs were sticking out from under an old Harley. He was in faded jeans and a grease-stained hoodie, with country music humming low from a nearby radio. He slid out slowly when he heard the door creak. Mom, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. What are you doing out here? I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him, my only child. His face was tired. His hair was grayer than I remembered. And he couldn't even meet my eyes. We need to talk, I said. He sat on the work stool near his tool bench, spinning a wrench between his fingers like he used to do when he was nervous as a boy. Look, Melissa was supposed to talk to you. I thought she had. She did. I said, now it's your turn. Derek exhaled. long and heavy. It's not what it looks like. Okay, then tell me what it is, I said, folding my arms. He ran a hand down his face. We're drowning. Mom. Melissa got laid off 3 months ago. Her agency shut down her whole department. She's trying to find something else. But nothing's come through. I've picked up as many AC repair jobs as I can, but it's not enough. My heart sank. We're behind on the mortgage. He continued. Credit cards are maxed out. Car loans overdue. And now the bank's sending warning letters. We're looking at foreclosure in the next 60 days. So you decided to sell my house instead, I said, keeping my voice level. He winced. It's not like that. Melissa's parents offered to buy it. They have cash. We thought you could move into a senior living place in the city somewhere comfortable. Safe. And with the money, we could pay off our debts? Start over. I stared at him. Stunned. You're talking about the house I bought when you were in high school. The house I worked 2 jobs to pay for. The house I fixed up with my bare hands after your father left. And you want to sell it to strangers so you can stay afloat. Derek dropped the wrench. It clanked on the concrete. We didn't mean to hurt you, he said. But we're out of options. There are always options, I replied. You just didn't want to consider any that required sacrifice on your part. He didn't argue. He didn't even move. That silence told me everything. The boy I once held through the night during fevers was now a man hiding in my garage, trying to trade away my life to save his own. And for the first time in a long time, I saw Derek not just as my son, but as a man who had failed to protect me. I stood up and walked toward the door. Emma, he said softly. I paused. You're not going to help us. I turned my head just enough to meet his eyes. I did. For 38 years. And then I left him sitting there with his broken Harley and the sound of his own silence. That night, sleep didn't come. I lay in my bed, the same creaky queen-sized frame I'd bought secondhand after the divorce, and listened to the familiar sounds of the house. The soft ticking of the thermostat. The pipes groaning ever so slightly when the heat kicked in. The creak of the floorboards settling above the garage. These weren't just noises. They were memories. Whispers of time. I stared out the window at the old pine tree in the front yard. I planted it myself the spring after Richard left. It was barely taller than me back then. Now it towered over the roof, casting long shadows across the bedroom every morning. I remember the day I bought this house. The 14th of April. 1999. Derek was 13. Skinny. Moody. Still blaming himself for his father leaving. And me, I was 42. Freshly divorced. Working 2 jobs, cleaning classrooms at the high school in the mornings, and scrubbing floors at the public library in the evenings. When the realtor handed me the keys, I didn't cry. I just stood in the living room and whispered. We made it. The walls were yellowed. The carpet smelled like cats. But it was ours. For the next 24 years, I poured every piece of myself into this place. 1 room at a time. 1 paycheck at a time. I replaced faucets, learned how to patch drywall, painted cabinets, and reupholstered chairs I found on the side of the road. I didn't have a lot, but what I had was real. Earned. The living room Derek's wife now wanted to modernize was where we'd celebrated every Christmas. The fireplace they planned to rip out had kept us warm during the ice storm of 2008. The wallpaper in the hallway, I spent an entire weekend fighting with it, laughing and crying at the same time when the glue refused to cooperate. But I never once considered giving up. Not when the roof leaked. Not when the heater broke down during winter. Not even when I had to sell my wedding ring just to cover a plumbing bill. Because this house wasn't just shelter. It was proof that I could survive, that I could raise a child alone, that I could build a life from scratch and still keep my dignity. And now my own son wanted to sell it off like some hand-me-down couch? I got out of bed and made myself a cup of chamomile tea. The kitchen was dimly lit. The cabinets were slightly worn. The tile cracked near the fridge. But to me, it was still beautiful. I thought of all the mornings I stood right there packing Derek's lunch. All the nights I sat at that tiny table with a bowl of soup and a mountain of unpaid bills. This was my kingdom. Mivar zone. My sanctuary. And I was not going to let it go just because life got a little uncomfortable for someone else. Because some things aren't for sale. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. I made my coffee. Like I always did, dark roast. No sugar, but something felt different. The bitterness didn't bother me. In fact, it grounded me. Because for the first time in a long while, I wasn't just reacting. I was planning. At noon, I drove to downtown Salem and pulled up in front of a red brick office with a bronze plaque that read, Dunn & Associates, Residential Real Estate. A young woman at the front desk smiled at me. Hi there. Can I help you? I'd like to speak with a realtor. I said, about selling my house? She blinked. Sure. Do you have an appointment? No. I replied. Calmly. But I have time to wait. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from a woman named Rachel Dunn, mid-40s. Sharp eyes. Blazer over jeans. She looked like someone who didn't waste words. Good. I didn't have time for fluff. I need to know. I began. If someone can sell a house that's in my name, without my permission? She looked at me. Measured. Is there a co-owner? No. Just me. Been in my name for 24 years. Rachel smiled softly and shook her head. Then no one, not a spouse. Not a child. Not even a lawyer can sell it without your signature. It's yours. Legally and completely. It was only a few words, but hearing them felt like the first breath after being underwater too long. I leaned back in my chair. Then I'd like to explore selling it. To someone I choose. Not my daughter-in-law's parents. Rachel sat forward. You'd be surprised how often this happens. Grown kids, assuming. In-laws moving in before the ink's dry. Happens more than you think. I believe it. I said, I just didn't think it would happen to me. We went over the basic square footage. Updates. Roof repairs. Heating system. I gave her the address and described the neighborhood. Redwood Hills. She said, jotting notes. Nice area. Especially now that the medical center's opened. Your place could fetch between $250 and $280 if the condition matches. I nodded. It matches. Rachel gave me a folder and her card. We'll schedule a walkthrough. Photos. Paperwork. I can bring in potential buyers as soon as Saturday. If you're open to it. Saturday. I said, pausing with a small smile. That's perfect. She tilted her head. Why do I get the sense that timing matters? Because... I replied, slipping the card into my purse. My daughter-in-law is throwing a welcome party that day. For her parents. At my house? The one she thinks they're moving into. Rachel let out a low whistle. Well then, let's give them something to remember. As I drove home, the weight in my chest felt a little lighter. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't made a scene. But for the first time since this whole thing began, I had a plan. They could plan their party. But I was planning something better. A quiet reminder that I still owned the keys. Saturday came with a light breeze and the scent of pine drifting through the air. By 10 a.m., the house was spotless. Every cushion fluffed. Every frame straightened. Every surface wiped. Not for Melissa's party, mind you, but for the visitors I had quietly arranged through Rachel Dunn. At 12:55, Rachel's SUV pulled up. And with it, the first couple, Chloe and Ben Ramirez. Newlyweds in their late 20s. With a toddler cradled in Ben's arms and hope etched across their faces, they marveled at the natural light in the kitchen, the fireplace, the backyard with its aging maple tree. It feels like the kind of place we could grow old in, Chloe whispered. But then, in the hallway, she lowered her voice. We were hoping it might be closer to $200. Ling, our budget is tight. I smiled kindly. I understand. But I'm afraid the market value is quite a bit higher. They nodded. Disappointed but gracious. Chloe kissed her son's forehead and said, "Thank you for letting us see it. It's a beautiful home." At 2:00, the second couple arrived, Walter and Linda Chase. Retired schoolteachers in their 70s. Walter moved slowly with a cane. Linda examined everything: outlets, storage space, steps between rooms. They adored the living room and commented on how quiet the street was. "I haven't seen wallpaper like this in years," Walter said with a smile. "My grandmother had something just like it." But when they reached the staircase, Walter hesitated. 2 stories might be too much for me these days. "I'm sorry," Linda said, holding his arm gently. "It's just not quite the right fit." They thanked me and left with warmth in their eyes, the kind of people who make you wish your house had one less staircase. And then, at 4:00 sharp, the third car arrived. An old green Ford pickup rolled to a quiet stop. Out stepped a tall man with sun-weathered skin and strong shoulders, followed by a woman in a denim skirt and a teenage girl in a windbreaker. "Afternoon?" "Ma'am," the man said, offering his hand. "I'm Caleb Granger. This is my wife, Martha, and our daughter, Zadie." The moment they stepped inside, something shifted. They didn't gawk. They didn't fawn. They observed. Respectfully, Caleb tapped the walls. Martha opened cabinets. Sadie peeked through windows and quietly traced her fingers along the edge of the kitchen counter. "She loves it," Martha whispered. Caleb crouched by the fireplace. "Sadie's got a heart condition. We've been living on a farm out east. But she needs to be near Salem General now. That's why we're looking. Not just for a roof for somewhere we can care for her properly." I watched Sadie stare out at the pine tree I planted 24 years ago. "From here," she said, "I can see the bus stop. I wouldn't have to miss school for every appointment." She looked at me, then smiled. Not the way kids smile when they want something, but the way they smile when they've found it. That's when I knew. I didn't want to sell my home, but if I had to, this was the kind of family I could hand it to. The sun dipped low over Redwood Hills, casting warm amber light across the street. The Welcome to the Neighborhood banner hung above my living room archway, fluttering every time someone opened the door. By 3:00 p.m., the house was full of laughter, hors d'oeuvre, and polite clinking of glasses. Melissa, in her ivory cocktail dress, flitted between neighbors, like she was already queen of the cul-de-sac. Derek stood awkwardly near the drinks table, trying to pretend this whole thing didn't make him want to disappear. The Whitmores, Travis, and Carol beamed like celebrities at a fan meet and greet. Carol showed off her wallpaper samples. Travis pointed to where his future basement woodshop would go. "I think I'll hang the tools along that wall," He told Mr. Halverson, our retired dentist neighbor. Nice. Open space. Great bones. From my spot near the back hallway, I watched it all, the party in full swing. Built on assumption, it was like watching a parade march through your living room while you were invisible. Until I decided I wouldn't be invisible anymore. At 4:01, two vehicles pulled up quietly in front of the house. First was Rachel's black SUV. Then came the old green Ford pickup. Caleb Granger stepped out, dressed neatly this time, with a leather folder tucked under one arm. Rachel walked beside him with the calm of someone who had already signed and sealed the truth. When we entered through the front door, the music and chatter didn't stop immediately. But when Melissa turned and saw Rachel, her smile froze mid-sentence. "Emma," she said, voice sharp behind her. "Practice charm?" "What's going on?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "This," I said, "is Mr. Caleb Granger. And this is Rachel Dunn, my realtor. Mr. Granger is purchasing this house." The room fell utterly silent. Carol blinked. Confused, Travis set his glass down. Carefully, like he was afraid it might shatter. Melissa's face drained of color. I don't understand," she stammered. "We already agreed. You agreed with each other." I said, still calm. "But this house was never yours to promise." Derek moved toward me. "Mom, we talked about this." "No." I said, "You talked. I listened. And then I made my own decision." Rachel opened her folder. "All the paperwork is in order. The house is solely in Emma Holloway's name. She is the legal and exclusive owner." Caleb nodded. "We've secured financing. Made an offer. Emma accepted." Melissa's voice cracked. "But we sent out invitations. The neighbors, they'll understand." I said, "Because this wasn't a celebration. It was a performance. And I'm ending the show. One by one." The neighbors started to gather their coats. Some nodded at me with quiet understanding. A few even smiled. Mrs. Green from across the street whispered as she passed me, "Good for you." "Sweetheart." Travis stood frozen. Carol fumbled with her purse. Melissa, for the first time since she married my son, had nothing left to say. And me, I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just stood tall in the middle of the house I built with my own two hands and took it back. The party was over. By 5:00 p.m. The house had gone quiet again, not the peaceful kind, but the kind of quiet that settles after a storm. The kind that forces people to sit with their disappointment. Carol Whitmore sat slumped on the edge of the sofa. Mascara smudged, clinging to a folded floral napkin, like it might reverse time. Travis stood by the fireplace, staring at the candles Melissa had insisted on, now nothing but pools of wax in glass jars. Derek stood by the window, shoulders hunched, his hands buried in his pockets. And Melissa paced back and forth across the living room, her heels tapping the hardwood like a metronome of frustration. "You don't get it," she finally burst out, turning to face me. "We needed that money. You just blew up everything, our plan. Our timeline. Our lives." "No," I said softly. "I just stopped you from blowing up mine." She looked to Derek, desperate for support. But he didn't move. He just kept staring out at the street, watching the last neighbor drive away. "I don't think I can forgive this," she said under her breath. I didn't flinch. "Then don't." She turned away, stunned. Derek finally spoke. Mom, can we talk, just us? We stepped into the kitchen. The candles on the table had gone out, but the scent of burnt wax lingered like ghosts of good intentions. He sat, folding his hands together. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, he said. I thought we could fix things as a family. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Fixing something means admitting it's broken. I said, but you and Melissa walked into my home and treated it like a blank check, like I didn't exist. Derek rubbed his forehead. We're desperate. Mom, the bills are piling up. Melissa's job hunt isn't going anywhere. I'm working 6 days a week just to stay current. I know. I said, you told me. I looked up. Would you still be willing to help us? Just a little. I nodded slowly. Yes. I'll give you $15,000. His eyes widened. Mom, thank you. On 3 conditions, I said, holding up a finger. 1, Melissa gets a job. Any job? Doesn't matter if it's marketing or mopping floors. He nodded. 2, you pick up a second source of income. Nights? Weekends, whatever it takes. Okay. And 3, you never, ever let anyone, especially your wife, assume they can speak for me again. This house? My life. My decisions. They are mine. He swallowed hard. You have my word. I'm holding you to it. I turned back toward the living room, where Melissa was silently gathering her decorations into a tote bag. Her parents had already retreated to the guest room to pack. Before I could step out, Derek said one more thing. Mom, I'm sorry. I nodded. I forgive you, I said. But remember this moment, because the next time you forget who I am, I might not be so kind. He didn't argue, because this time, he finally understood who was in charge. The next 3 weeks moved quickly, a blur of cardboard boxes, donation runs, and one final deep clean of every corner I'd once called mine. I sold the old recliner Derek used to nap in, gave away the guest room bedding, packed up the photo albums, the teacup collection, the books I'd read a dozen times but couldn't part with. Everything else I let it go. Caleb Granger stopped by twice, once with Martha and their daughter Sadie to measure furniture, and again just to check the basement's humidity levels. They weren't just buying a house. They were preparing to belong in it. Sadie picked her bedroom, the same room Derek once claimed at age 13. Back when he still believed in rock bands and freedom. She stood at the window and smiled. You can see the whole street from here, she said. It feels like a real neighborhood. It is, I told her. And it's yours now. On the final day, I stood alone in the middle of the empty living room. The echoes felt louder without the furniture, but not hollow. No. This house had absorbed too many memories to ever feel empty. I ran my fingers across the faded floral wallpaper one last time and whispered, "Thank you." At precisely 10:00 a.m., Caleb arrived with Rachel and the final deed in hand. The money had transferred. The signatures were dry. The keys rested in my palm like a small weight I was finally ready to release. "I hope this place treats you well," I said, handing them over. "We'll take care of it." Caleb promised, like it's always been ours. I believed him. As I walked to my car, Rachel smiled. "So, what's next for Emma Holloway?" "A little 2-bedroom apartment off Birch Street," I replied. "Close enough to walk to the farmer's market. Far enough that no one assumes they own my walls." She laughed. "Sounds perfect." "It is," I said. I moved in that same afternoon. Nothing fancy, 2 rooms. Modest kitchen. Wide windows that let the morning sun pour in like honey. But it was mine. Fully. Quietly. Unquestionably mine. A week later, I got a card in the mail. Handwritten. It was from Sadie. Dear Miss Holloway, thank you for letting us live in your home. I already love it here. I put my books on the shelf and planted sunflowers in the backyard. I know it wasn't easy to leave, but I'll take good care of your room. I promise. Love. Sadie Granger. I held that card in my hands for a long time, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not because I'd won a fight, not because I'd made a point, but because I'd chosen myself, my voice, my space, my freedom, and gave my home to someone who saw its soul, not just its square footage. I didn't just move houses. I moved forward. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was free. And that was enough.